我幫你啊！阿婆，你做咩咁夜仲執汽水罐啊？啊！
後生仔，乜你睇到我嘅咩？咁你真係唔係好彩。
Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the laundry room. I got my professional grandpa mug. Hell yeah. It's Friday morning. I'm having some coffee. I'm working from home today. And I'm taking a quick little break to record a video for you. Last night, I watched Troublesome Night. This is a movie I have been wanting to see for like 4 years. The first time I interviewed Arne Venema, he spoke extensively and very glowingly of this film and of the series in general. If you're unfamiliar with Troublesome Night, this film was released in 1997. It is an anthology ghost film, except it's not quite like a full-on segmented anthology. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second when I get into more details on the film, but it is, for all intents and purposes, an anthology ghost film. There are 4 different stories in this film. There are 3 different directors. The primary director, who I believe kind of like oversaw the project and was involved in a lot of them, is Herman Yao. Herman Yao directed Untold Story. He directed Ebola Syndrome. Recently, he's done like kind of more blockbuster type of movies. Like he did the Shockwave movies with Andy Lau and like that kind of stuff. Louis Koo is in this film, and I from what I understand, he's in a number of the Troublesome Night films. Simon Loy, who is called, I think, the Ghost King of Hong Kong, which is, I think, what Arne told me in the interview when we talked about this guy, who has written books about ghosts and been involved in documentaries and knows a lot about like the lore of ghosts in Hong Kong and stuff like that. And he's very interesting because he's kind of like the presenter in the film, but he also acts in it. So I'll explain that when I get into a little bit more detail. Alan Ting is in this movie, Jason Chu, Teresa Mok, Ada Choi, Helena Law Lan, Lee Chick Chi has a little cameo, which is a kind of a joke on Kar-wai that's really funny. There's some very meta stuff about the film industry in this movie. And so, like I said, I've been meaning to see this movie for quite a while, and it's Halloween season now, and I've been watching a lot of horror movies. And for the past several years, I've wanted to try to put together like a list of a couple horror films from Hong Kong to review and have them out like in October around Halloween, and things have just kind of consistently gotten in the way of those plans. I did do Haunted Cop Shop a couple years ago for Halloween, which is written by Kar-wai and is like kind of a horror comedy type of movie. But this year I decided more deliberately to like actually sit down. I'm going to do 4 Hong Kong horror films, and I'm going to try to release them. They'll be released early in Patreon, so huge shout out to our patrons, and then they'll be released like one a day the week of Halloween. So like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because Halloween's on a Thursday. So Troublesome Night is one of those movies, and I absolutely loved this film. I'm annoyed that it took me so long to get to it. I'm very happy that Arne Venema recommended it to me, that I remembered that he had recommended it to me, because I was actually going back over my first interview with him, looking for the titles of the Hong Kong horror films that he recommended, because I want to try to watch some of them. I was like, that's right, he loves the Troublesome Night films. He put 4 of those movies tied at number 1 on his list, and one of them was the first one, which is the one that I watched. The series went all the way until 2017, so it ran for 20 years, and they made 20 of these movies. So I'm going to try to pick up, they're available on Hong Kong Blu-ray. I ended up watching it digitally, but there are Hong Kong Blu-rays of a number of them, and I think in December, once we get our either November, December, like when I get the Patreon payout, I'm going to try to buy like a stack of movies from Hong Kong, like Hong Kong Blu-ray releases of films that I haven't been put out by like the boutique labels in like Europe or the US. And so that I can review those and talk about those for the channel and stuff. And I'm going to try to get some of the other Troublesome Night films when I do that, because I really did love this movie. It is so fun. It's very much like a spooky ghost film that is in keeping in terms of like the tone and the feel of it, of a lot of like the Taoist, Jiangxi, like hopping vampire, Hong Kong ghost supernatural films that I really love, like the Mr. Vampire films, and like The Dead and the Deadly and like that kind of stuff. Haunted Cop Shop is another film that's kind of in that subgenre where there's like goofiness to it, but it's also like genuinely kind of like creepy, spooky monster movie vibes. And that's exactly like the kind of film, like, I mean, there are a lot of different types of horror films I love, but I really love those types of movies that have this kind of like old school spookiness and almost like kind of gothic tone that reminds me of Universal monster films and other like old school horror films from like the 30s, 40s, 50s, but then also has a modern feel to it too. When I interviewed Arne Venema, one of the things that he said that he loves so much about these films is that they really help you understand Hong Kong in a way that, like, kind of films that are more like crime films, violent movies, martial arts movies, like those types of things, those are like a heightened reality, right? And I very much saw what he meant when I watched this film. This is very much a movie about regular people in regular places doing regular things. Those places just happen to be haunted, or there are rumors that they're haunted, or there's like some kind of supernatural thing going on, right? But it's like people in their apartments. Like, there's really cool shots of just people in their apartments, people out at like little kind of cafe type of things. My favorite of the four was the final of the four films, a lot of which takes place in a movie theater. And you see, like, they go up to the box office and the guy selling the tickets has a, like, literally like a map of the movie theater that shows every single seat. And he's crossing off the seats where tickets have been purchased. And he's like, I still have this seat available, this seat available. And then it's kind of in like this high-rise type of building, or like a building where the theater is like up a couple floors. So everyone's like walking up together with their tickets. And then it shows them going into the theater, just like everyday life, run-of-the-mill activities in Hong Kong. But then you have this supernatural kind of like haunted element to it that adds a lot and makes it more exciting. And it's really, really cool to see. So let me tell you what each of the four films are about, and I'll give you just like a couple more of my thoughts, and then I'll be out of your hair. The first one is about a group of three friends who are guys. It's Louis Koo and his two buddies, and they go out to this kind of like remote rural beach in Hong Kong to celebrate the birthday of one of them. And while they're out there, Louis Koo goes out in the woods to take a dump, and he thinks he sees a ghost. And there's like this old creepy graveyard there, and like, you know, like there's like fog blowing and like spooky stuff going on, right? And then they go out in the woods and like look around, and when they come back to the campsite, someone else has showed up and is also camping there, and it ends up being three women. So the guys and the women are hanging out, and they like dare each other to go find the creepy old cemetery, and they meet like this old man who's like the caretaker of the cemetery, and it's very like creepy, spooky, right? And there's a lot of twists. I can very much see why that of the four films in here, I could see why that's the opening one, because it's got a lot of twists. It's very intriguing, and it draws you in like right away. It's very well made too. There's like some really cool crane shots and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a really good opening section to draw you into the film. I also forgot to mention that the film really opens before that with Simon Loy, the Ghost King guy, talking to the camera about superstition and ghosts and beliefs and stuff like that, right? And he appears a number of times throughout the film talking directly to the camera about superstition, ghosts, traditions, history in Hong Kong. And so he's kind of like this narrator, connective tissue. But the characters from the different stories also, like there's a couple of the characters from the first story who show up as a kind of like connective tissue to the second one, and then they're featured prominently in the third one, and then they're kind of like these peripheral figures in the fourth one. So it's kind of like they're creating a whole world, basically, right? Rather than having these disconnected individual films that are simply together because they're thematically connected, they use characters and a narrator and locations and stuff like that to braid the whole thing together. So it's almost like this cinematic universe of Hong Kong ghost stories. I really liked that aspect of it because it makes it really charming and it really draws you into it. So the second film is about so there's a guy who's a real estate agent, and it's pouring rain for the whole film, right? And I should also say that each one of the segments all takes place in one night, right? Hence the title Troublesome Night, right? Or I guess I should say one day, because one of them does have like a little segment like kind of into like the next day. Well, now I'm thinking I might be wrong, because I think there's one that takes place over 2 days. Anyway, they mostly take place at night, and 3 of them take place in one night, I guess I should say. So the title Troublesome Night refers to like the nights on which these troublesome things are occurring, right? So it like does tie into the events of the film. So in the second one, there's a guy who's a real estate agent, and it's like pissing rain, and he's in the car with this woman who works at his company, right? And in the back of the car is a woman to whom he's trying to sell a house. She's got like a feng shui expert fortune teller guy who's in the car with them, who's saying stuff like, you know, the bathroom in this house is in the wrong place, the kitchen is facing the wrong way, the bed is oriented incorrectly, like you're going to have a lot of bad mojo in this house. It's not a good house to buy. And the real estate agent guy's like, I tried to find a house that fit every single criteria that you were looking for, including your budget, which is low and all this. They're kind of having like this like argument. And the feng shui guy starts going for the real estate guy. And he's like, you've got secrets, you're hiding something, blah, blah, right? So it's like all this tension in this car. Meanwhile, the wife of the real estate agent is, it's their anniversary, him and his wife, and she's gone out to buy him a present, and they're supposed to meet at this restaurant. And then, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but like just a bunch of really, really weird stuff happens to the point where you're like, what the hell is going on? And it's almost like there's one scene in particular where it's like, am I watching a David Lynch movie? And then there's like a plot twist and you realize what's been happening the whole time. I really liked that one. Okay. So then the third one, we go back to some of the characters from the first one. And it's two of the guys who went out to the island. And one of the women who they met out there, who's now the guy's girlfriend. So like we found, they got together, they started dating or whatever. And she starts acting really weird. And then all this other crazy stuff starts happening. And then they end up actually asking for the help of the Simon Loy Ghost King guy, who is the narrator of the movie. So then it becomes this is a very meta movie, right? Because there's like all this there's like these jokes about the film industry, and the two guys who are like, Louis Koo's buddies, who like we see in the other segments of the film, they and Louis Koo comes back too. So like a lot of the characters recur, but those two guys who are like buddies, they work in the film industry, like low level in the film industry. So like we see them on set, and it's like this very meta thing, right? And so this Ghost King guy, they go and enlist his help because they think something supernatural is going on with the girlfriend. And then in the final one, like I said, they work in the film industry, right? There's like a parody of a moment of romance in this film. So this movie is funny. It's very funny, but it's also genuinely spooky and creepy. I didn't find it scary, but I found it spooky in like a really satisfying way, right? So this guy is going to the theater to see a screening of this movie that he's been in that's kind of like a parody of a moment of romance, where you like the motorcycle riding and the wedding dress and like all this stuff, right? And he buys tickets. Like I said, there's a scene where he sees like the map of the tickets, and they're like, we want these tickets or whatever. And there are certain tickets they want that the guy won't sell them. And he's like, well, they're not crossed off. And he's like, those are reserved for locals, right? You can't have those. So like people who, come every day or whatever, who live in the neighborhood. So they go into the theater and they sit in their seats, and they don't like their seats. So they move into these other seats that the guy refused to sell them the tickets for. And then all this weird and supernatural stuff starts happening. So the whole thing takes place like in the movie theater, basically in real time. And that was probably my favorite one. One of the things that impressed me so much with this movie is that all of the locations are very simple and all of the setups are very simple, but they get so much out of it. The stories are so interesting. The characters are so rich. The filmmaking is so good. The ambiance is incredible. And to me, that style of filmmaking is way more impressive than like a really great high concept movie where the movie itself is kind of generic, right? I would much rather watch like a movie that doesn't have an eye-popping premise. Like, oh, these friends go to the beach for the friend's birthday and they find an old graveyard and there might be ghosts and there might not be, right? Or like, to take the fourth one as an example, like, oh, these people go to a movie theater and like creepy stuff starts happening, right? Like that's on paper, that's not very interesting, right? And it's the job of the advertising department to figure out how to sell that and make it interesting, right? But it's so damn good because you take this very simple idea and this very simple location, and you, using perspective, your unique perspective as a filmmaker. I should say, I wrote down the names of the writers and the directors here. So the directors are Herman Yao, Stephen Cheng, and Victor Tam. And the writers are Kenneth Lau, Chao Ting, and Young Woo Choi. So those six people together, the directors and the writers, using their talent, their creativity, their knowledge of craft and stuff, have created these really unique, compelling, entertaining, funny, spooky, original stories using very little in terms of like high concept, eye-catching, like big budget blockbuster filmmaking. It's just really good, intelligent, innovative thinking and creativity. And that's what I loved about this film the most. And like the meta film industry stuff is really funny as well. Like I said, I really love the connecting tissue. Now, I'm going to overanalyze this movie a little bit. I'm not going to go too into detail on this because this is not something on which I am much of an expert. But this movie came out in 1997, which we know is the year of the handover, when Hong Kong passed from British rule to Chinese rule. Basically, all of this film is about people in the present coming into knowledge of and conflict with the past, traditions, history, culture, all of which are kind of obscured and hidden by the modern city and modern culture. And all of these things being manifest in ghosts. And the fear and confusion that that creates, right? So in the face of this handover, where there is this worry of mainland Chinese government and culture coming in and overstamping what is unique and original and special about Hong Kong in its own specific separate culture, which evolved on its own over the course of, decades, generations, and centuries and whatever. You have a movie that's very much about lost, hidden, forgotten histories and cultures, and the way that those ghosts haunt the present and make it hard for people in the present to live their lives. That's too obvious of a metaphor for me to think this is a coincidence, right? And it's a brilliant metaphor. It's not a bad metaphor. Obvious is not bad, right? In fact, I would say it's probably better because it's easier for the average person who just wants to be entertained and doesn't spend all their time thinking about this stuff like I do because I have nothing better to do with my life. But people with real responsibilities and real jobs and stuff like that who see movies because they like to, because they're entertaining and they're fun and they enjoy them, it's good to have a solid, clear, obvious metaphor at the center of a film if you're trying to make a point. And I think that ghost metaphor does a great job of conveying a lot of those anxieties that you see in a lot of these films about the handover. It's also very interesting that one of the guys who works in the film industry mentions in this film that the film industry is not in a good place. No one ever mentions the handover that I could tell in this movie, right? But by 1997, John Woo had gone to Hollywood, right? Chow Yun-fat had gone to Hollywood. Choi Hawk, didn't he go to Hollywood around that time? He was making the Van Damme movies and stuff like that. Ringo Lam was making Van Damme movies, had gone to Hollywood, right? Around that time. And so you have this kind of thing of the film industry struggling and all these ghosts and traditions and culture and the film industry as indicative of this unique form of art and voice for Hong Kong. Everything is kind of struggling and confused, and the present is collapsing under the weight of the ghosts in this history. It's really interesting. So I loved this movie. It's Troublesome Nights from 1997. A huge shout out to Arna Venema for recommending it to me. My name is Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Thank you for watching as always, and we'll see you next time.